back to another episode of MedTech Trends. I'm your host, Dorian. So today we have with us the CEO of Curatio, Lynda Brown-Ganzert. I believe you're joining us today from Vancouver. Is that right?
Just north of Vancouver, you got
Okay,
it.
just north of Vancouver. All right. So now Curatio is a private social health network, and it's designed to connect and empower patients. And part of what it does is it will increase adherence and improve outcomes in a pretty broad range of populations of folks with various diseases. It's now available in 102 countries and 20 languages, and maybe that's increased a little bit since I read that statistic. And Curatio's mission is to leave no patient alone. In this world, patients are benefiting from peer-to-peer support, realizing improved outcomes, and are benefiting from increased mental health, reduced loneliness in their diagnosis or condition. So thanks so much for joining us, Lynda. I really appreciate your time this afternoon.
My pleasure.
We had a chance to talk a little bit before, and I was really interested to hear a little bit about your background, how your experiences, I guess, growing up, how that kind of contributed to your current interests, and also what inspired you to create Curatio to begin with. So, before we get into what the company sort of does and how it's helping the healthcare system and patients as well, I wonder if we can kind of go back to the earlier roots, if you will. How did your experiences growing up, how did that contribute to your interest in social networks and how the technology, especially today, can really be used to bring people together?
Yeah. Well, I'm going way back now, but
Yeah.
um, certainly, I, uh, I grew up in a household that was tech friendly. My dad was in telecommunications for many years. My mom was a teacher, and so the apple doesn't fall that far from the tree. So I'm part geek and I'm part connector, and I think way back, like in grade 8, I won the science fair for my presentation on how computers work. And, since then, I've been just a lifelong passion and interest in using technology to connect people. But what I came back to time and again was a sense of belonging. And how do you connect people that aren't within the circle, that aren't connected? And I think part of that comes from moving around so much as a kid and always being the outsider in different schools and different cities, different countries, and understanding the real necessity of belonging and connecting, and how important that was. So that connector part is very much comes from lived experience. The geek part, I think, is built into my DNA, and the entrepreneurial part was, I didn't know it then, but I started my first business when I was 14, and it turns out I was an entrepreneur, and it was probably not until about 2 decades later that I realized I was an entrepreneur. But as an entrepreneur, I love solving problems, and so Curatio is just a mix of, everything that I'm passionate about, and solving a problem that I saw in the world that needed to be fixed.
It sounds like a lot of those early experiences are they're sort of bubbling up into this curiosity and interest in social networks. But then there's also, since you mentioned that you lived in a couple different countries, there's also the cultural component, which is really interesting to me because, I mean, I'm first generation Canadian. Like my parents are from overseas too. Grew up around a lot of people from a lot of different cultures, so I was very open to that, and I still have friends from a lot of different places around the world. But what it did was it made me very sensitive to the importance of cultural context around everything that we do. I mean, literally everything is affected by our culture and our understanding of. Uh, well, I mean, it puts everything into a different lens. So, in a healthcare setting, we typically think that healthcare delivery is going to be highly impacted by the way that we deliver that healthcare in a culturally sensitive way. Um, in theory, super important, and it's been studied very well. In practice, very difficult to do. I'm just wondering if I can get your perspective on that. I mean, is there a place for modern digital therapies, if you will, to enhance that cultural aspect, that cultural sensitivity?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And Curatio is used in about 104 countries now in 20 languages. And so, not only have we learned a lot about localizing and being culturally appropriate in each of those areas. But there's also a culture for each condition. So how a group of patients living with multiple sclerosis define themselves and their culture is very different than a group of patients with sickle cell disease, as an example. Even the terms that they use to describe themselves, or their tribes, what that lived experience is like. And so, there's this really interesting aspect of culture as related to different conditions that we sometimes don't really take into account. And so we've been, thoughtful at Curatio in making sure to always be patient centric and always go back to that patient group and that patient culture, and be sure that we're using the cultural attributes, the naming conventions that are important to them, that they feel define them.
That's an interesting take on it as well. And again, 102 different countries. That's really cool. Is there a list? Like, if anybody was interested in, is there a list on your website or anywhere? Like, what?
That's a good idea. There
Yeah,
isn't.
I'm really
We
curious,
should
or a
have.
map or something like that. That would be interesting. Yeah.
That's a
Wow.
good idea.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The other thing I noticed on, speaking of some of your media, so like on the YouTube channel, a lot of great kind of intro videos on what the company is, and it describes how it works as well. Um, there's also an intro video to the workplace, and I think one of the emphasis is on the fact that there are the employees are sort of they're also culturally diverse as well. So Curatio is a very diverse company, and that that kind of feeds into the whole making these platforms very useful and accessible to a very wide range of people. That was
It
interesting.
is. Yeah, it is absolutely. And, we do have a very diverse team and a fantastic team. But the thing I've always thought about with it, we tend to think about technology as agnostic or not biased, and that's just not the case, right? Technology does have a bias, and Harold Innes did some really interesting work on that in the early days. But with that in mind, technology has a bias, products have a bias, and so if you don't have a diverse team working on a product, then you're not going to get that diversity reflected in what the end product is. So it's important to us that it is. That we do have a diverse team because we're working globally, and that comes out in the product design and comes out in the way that we design what we're offering in a global context.
That's interesting. We don't actually hear about that very often, but lately I've actually been seeing a lot more um, innovation focused people, business development focused people, entrepreneurs kind of posting on that topic, because there's so much in the med device space and digital health space, digital therapeutic space coming out right now, and the need to consider the cultural aspects is actually um, it's been very well studied, and I would agree. Evidence kind of points in that direction that yeah, there are biases built into these technologies. So yeah, really interesting. We don't actually hear enough about that. So I bet we can have a whole conversation on that topic. Okay, I would love to dive into what Curatio essentially is, and obviously it's a social network, but one of the unique, very kind of high level perspectives about the company is that it's a private social network. So unlike a lot of companies using, say, private groups on Facebook or on other social media platforms, it is a private, highly curated environment. I wonder if we can kind of dive into the differences here. So we threw these words around a little bit too easily: social network, peer support groups, private networks, private groups, and so on. Is there a way to kind of differentiate between all the above?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we always think of it as a social health prescription. So, from a user's perspective, if you go into that mindset, if whether you've had a heart attack or been diagnosed with cancer, or are caring for someone who's just had a health event, you go into this whole tailspin of, okay, I need to learn everything I can about this condition. I need to understand what I need to do next. I need to navigate a whole bunch of things. I need reminders and appointments. I need to understand what therapy might be appropriate for me. And most of all, I want to talk to somebody else who's been through it. Um, so pretty much everyone can relate to that experience, if not through themselves, somebody that they love. And what we found is that when you have this type of social health prescription, that you can deliver in a very personalized and private way, a day by day support, for that patient and their family, where they do have, curated evidence based information and content, so that they know what they're reading, and the content that they have is true and accurate and clinically validated. And they also have the daily tracking tools that help making being sick a little bit easier. But most importantly, really at the core of what we're doing is trying to help people connect to others that are going through the same experience or have been through the same experience. Because there's a lot of wisdom and support there, and quite often it's not something you're going to post on a general, a mainstream, social network. There's often a lot of stigma and isolation around many of these conditions, and so, the privacy aspect was important. Being sure that users could own their own data was important, and then giving our customers a way to build relationships directly with their patient populations. So, I think what sometimes people fail to realize is that if you're building a community on a mainstream social network or a platform, that's not really your community. It might be people that are connected to you and associated with you, but you don't own the platform, you don't own the relationship, you don't have any of the data insights, and so we really, we're the social connection in the background that give our customers a way to build, on a privacy and regulatory compliant platform, a direct connection with our patient populations.
Okay. Wow. Okay, that is quite different. Hadn't thought about it quite that way. Um, but I see the distinction there. And I was just giving an example of in Facebook private groups or not private groups if anybody is interested in doing that sort of thing. But there are also a lot of these platforms, I think, forums and sometimes other kind of private networks that have popped up in the last couple of years. Um, and I think the functionality is probably a little bit different across these platforms. But nevertheless, I think there's definitely demand for a place to sort of aggregate, to find peers that have gone through very similar experiences, and that you can learn from. Because it's not a matter of just Googling and finding out information. Sometimes it helps to have an actual person that you can talk to who's actually been there, and you can learn from. And that was another thing that I really was curious to get your perspective on, is that it, there's so much information out there that can you, if you're diagnosed with a certain medical condition, can you learn more from, let's say, your peers or a large network of peers who have the same condition, and have already been through that, have already gone through their medical consults, have already gone through all the tests, all the results, lab results, and all the treatments and follow-ups and so on, and rehabilitation and so on, whatever might be involved. Can you learn more from your peers in that sense than you can by, say, talking to a specialist or two, a medical specialist?
I mean, it's a partnership, right? It's really about patient empowerment, and so every part of that ecosystem has a role to play. So absolutely, I mean, your specialist is your go to, and we certainly don't replace that. We have things like virtual visits, we have coaches, we have professionals in the platform. We've partnered up to do real time patient monitoring with CloudDX, so we have all of those checks and balances in place, but it's very much a partnership between, the patient and their specialist, and we don't want to get in the way of that, right? We don't want to disrupt that at all. What we want to do is make sure that that patient is as informed, as empowered, as activated as they can possibly be, and that we're helping to offload the specialist. And so, recognizing, the demand on their time is being able to deliver evidence-based information in a more scalable way, and often, they're trying to provide social support to their patients, and we'll talk to doctors and nurses that are literally they'll call one patient and on the phone and say, would you be willing to talk to this patient? And then 2 weeks later, they'll be in touch with this patient, and it's incredibly laborious and time consuming. So we just give them an easy way to prescribe that social support, but within a safe environment, within a curated and evidence-based environment. Because one of the challenges is, of course, you can have misinformation, and you can have dangerous information. So we've really built in a lot of checks and balances, both with technology and with humans, or human coaches on the platform, so that we're making sure that we're monitoring for that, and we're filtering and addressing anything that is erroneous, and also giving people access to experts and access to content that they can trust.
Now, I definitely want to come back to the partnerships that you have with healthcare providers, clinicians, and so on, and how this sort of plays out through your partnership with CloudDX in particular. I'm really curious about that. Another great company in the space. Um, if we just kind of zoom in on some of the services and solutions that Curatio provides, I took a look at the website. Of course, there's a suite of solutions, and also it looks like there are a number of tools that enable people to get onboarded, new customers, clients to get onboarded, and sort of go through the process of setting up a network, and then really engaging with the communities that they want to engage with. So I wonder if you can take me through the actual solutions. What are they, and how does the onboard process work?
So at the core of our platform is a privacy and regulatory compliance social platform. So that's our SaaS platform, and then on top of that, we have data insights as a services business, and we also have marketing and content development. So end to end, we can support a customer from the social plugin and the technology platform all the way through to deploying and communicating and developing custom content when needed. Plus, quite a growing area in terms of data insights and those sort of contextual data insights that are in aggregate and de-identified, but also point towards what we call real world evidence. So those are sort of the three building blocks of our business: is the platform, the data insights, and what we call the micro agency. From a technical perspective on the platform itself, we're combining a couple of different things, a couple of pieces of technology. So, the first is around a matchmaking algorithm that we've patented that does a one-to-many sort of matching approach to help people connect with those that are most appropriate. Not just based on condition, but also based on things like lifestyles and interests and hobbies and stage of journey. So that's sort of the first part. And then we layer in some AI so that we've got a health buddy, a health concierge that helps the user navigate through the platform and can do things like automated check-ins and assessments, and is a very helpful friend, if you will, on the platform. And then we have a whole content stream that is both community wide, so that everyone can participate in, and then program specific. So we have folks doing 12-week programs with us. We have other users doing self assessments, and we have live events and groups. So all of that's running in the background. And then finally, we have a whole sort of set of tracking tools, and those are both qualitative and quantitative, and they can relate to things like virtual visits or the real-time patient monitoring. But they also tap into things like, whether it's sleep quality or stress and anxiety, or whether it's more quantitative, like blood pressure, ferritin level, blood glucose. So as a whole, it really is support in the palm of your hand, and an end-to-end type of solution. For the user, it's a really easy onboardings. You download the app and away you go. For our customer, we're doing both white label, so where this will be embedded in their offering in a seamless experience for their patients, so they can onboard directly that way, which is really simple. Or we're also sponsoring some communities on Curatio for some of our customers. So again, you would just download the Curatio app and away you go.
Okay, so as an individual, as a patient, let's say I'm a patient with diabetes. I'm looking for to connect with other folks going through the same thing. And then especially during COVID, and I want to come back to the topic of how COVID has impacted everything. Um, but I'm at home a lot, maybe not having as many regular appointments as I normally would. So I just want to connect with people and stay up to date with treatments and with everything related to my condition. So I could just download the app. And is there any cost to the layperson, if you will?
No, so we've always felt very strongly the patient shouldn't pay, and you can also join as a family member or caregiver. There's different pathways for each role, but no, the patient doesn't pay. And then, for example, if you were downloading our Stronger Together app, which is another white label, you would find I think we've got 3 diabetes programs running in there: one for type 2, one for diabetes reversal, one for pre-diabetes with Dr. Brendan Byrne. So depending on what you're needing, and some of those will be partner offerings, and some will just be openly available.
That sounds pretty awesome. Can you give us a sense of like how many patients are on the platform? And just out of curiosity, because diabetes is such a huge space, do you know roughly how many patients with diabetes are on the platform? Where that's like the focus, the main thing that they're on?
I don't have that
Off
off
the
the
top?
top of my head. Yeah,
Fair enough. Fair enough.
yeah,
I
I
put you on the
don't.
spot. I know.
um, what I can say is that each community is a little bit different. So if it's a rare condition, it might be, a couple hundred people, as opposed to a chronic condition, which would be, thousands. So, that keeping in mind the platform itself is really agnostic. So we're built to support what our partners need in any condition. So the platform's agnostic. We're even running a parenting program during COVID to help parents that are trying to juggle raising kids with this strange time. So lifestyle, rare disease, chronic disease. As I mentioned, the platform's agnostic. It's built to work for any condition, and we're really just the engine behind our customers and helping them build those direct communities and connections with their patients.
Okay. Now, since you mentioned rare diseases, this is another area that uh, is, uh, is extremely important. It has growing interest, and it has actually for years, but from a lot of the big healthcare players. And since you mentioned that, I want to kind of put on the the customer hat, if you will. So if I'm a new rare disease medicines maker, and I want to engage with patients. Let's say I want to build out a patient support program, that sort of thing. What would be the onboarding process for me in that case as a rare disease company?
So a couple of different pathways there. Like if you have a patient support program, then we can embed and integrate right within it. So as your patient is onboarding onto therapy, we can be a part of that overall offering through a PSP or hub service. So that's one way. We can also help in advance of a therapy release. So let's say the therapy is not quite in market yet, but we want to build a community of general knowledge, not branded, and just a general kind of condition community. We can be helpful there as well. Certainly, it can be bundled with a therapy as a part of the support. And then on the provider side, and we have providers that are prescribing this, to patients that are, let's say, pre-surgical and getting ready for surgery, or patients that are going through colorectal um, situation. So it's the platform's built to be really aligned with wherever the patient naturally onboards is where we want to plug in. So back to your specialist example, that's providing the specialist with a way to prescribe this, just as they would sort of add it to an order set. Um, and with a pharmaceutical manufacturer, it'd be, if someone's starting therapy, that we would plug into that and be the support there. If it's an employee, we would be plugged into the employee portal and available to them, to a large employer that way.
I'm also really curious. We're talking a little bit about how providers can engage on these platforms with the patients. Um, do you have you gotten any feedback is kind of a broad question, but do providers sort of give feedback to Curatio on how their patients are doing now that they've gone on the platform, and how do you really engage prescribers to sort of prescribe Curatio as part of their intervention or the treatment plan? Is that a thing?
Yeah, it is a thing, and I mean, bottom line is they're seeing improved outcomes. So, they're seeing patients that are better educated, empowered, more informed with their condition, that are, really having that partnership with their specialists. So, yeah, they're seeing improved health outcomes. At the end of the day, is what everybody's after.
Hmm.
The patient, most importantly, right?
Okay, yeah. And so, yeah, I'm still I'm really fascinated with how uh, physicians or really any kind of healthcare provider can engage with this platform. This kind of reminds me too. It wasn't that long ago where the idea of prescribing a digital platform or a digital therapy was like just far fetched, just like didn't make any sense. Didn't It didn't really exist. And then we have we now have lists of companies and products that can actually be prescribed. I'm not sure where Canada is on that, but it's been a little while since I've looked at it. But I know UK generated a list a long time ago. I think they offer a variety of therapies that you can actually digital therapies that you can actually prescribe. US is in the same position, so it's a very interesting time, and I think it's really just been accelerated by COVID. Um, yeah, and this is where the sort of the background to that question came from. And again, as a provider, I would want to help my patients actually adhere to therapies much better. I would definitely be interested in achieving better outcomes. And then of course there's also opportunities to engage with patients from a distance nowadays. So telehealth is now a big offering that a lot of companies have. I'm curious, is that also incorporated into Curatio's platform?
It is. Yeah, it is, absolutely. So you can do a telehealth visit from the platform as well. And that's all, that's back to making sure that we're strengthening the relationship between provider and patient. We're certainly, wanting to be as supportive as we can there. And, I often think of y- you know, providers are just so overloaded, and this pandemic has been so hard on them, and we often don't see that. And so, if we can provide them, some support and a way to offload some of that sort of repetitive work, where, if you're prepping someone pre-surgically and you're saying the same thing, 20 times over a day, can we help with that? Can we help with the check-ins? And certainly just make, really, really honor and value the provider's time and make the best use of it. So, we're very much designed to be supportive and to help with some of that. We're offloading some of that workload.
Is this part of the partnership with CloudDX? I know they offer like telehealth services as one of their several solutions. Is that how that works out?
Yeah, I mean, CloudDX is an awesome company that does advanced real-time patient monitoring, which means, for a provider, they can send their patient home after a stroke, after open heart surgery, and the patient can comfortably be taking their own vitals and sending that in via FDA-approved Bluetooth devices and system. And what's lovely about it is the patient has their own dashboard, the provider has their dashboard. The provider has the controls over, acceptable levels, when they want to get alerts, what types of data they want to view. So it really just enables the patient to go safely home, and to be supported in their home. In a really lovely way. So we're delighted. We've partnered up with CloudDX around a program called Stronger Together, and that's to support people during COVID, from outpatients to the parents that I mentioned, to people living with chronic condition, and we're getting just great feedback on that.
The Stronger Together initiative. I know there's a separate page on the Curatio website for that, and it shows essentially a list of programs, and then you can sign up, and you can get involved in, well, you can participate directly in the programs. They're also tailored to specific therapy areas. So you have the diabetic program. There's and a whole host of other ones too. How long has the program been going for? And then I'm also really curious, what's the overall kind of aim of the Stronger Together initiative?
Stronger Together is very much a curatio, so it's like one in the same. But some of the additions there is around the telehealth and the advanced real time patient monitoring with CloudDX. And so this is a suite of in the the backstory is we saw with the pandemic that there was these patient populations that were um, that weren't able to go to their clinical rehab or weren't able to go to stroke recovery club, or weren't able to meet with their support groups. And so we talked to providers and we talked to health authorities, and we talked to patients and said, okay, well, what would help? And what we developed from that is a whole series of 12-week programs with day-to-day support and coaches that are doing a fantastic job in helping their patient populations in the app. And this 12-week sort of day-to-day program is really around keeping people healthy at home. And so, back to the pre-surgical, you've got folks on there that are awaiting hip and knee replacements. And so this gives them, a nice day by day, 12-week program leading up to their surgery, that helps them get prepared and understand what they need to do, and then helps them get, set up for post surgically and transitioning back home safely. So that's it. Stronger Together was really us looking at, what was needed and where we could be most helpful during the pandemic, and then putting our platform into play along with a number of fantastic partners, some of which I've mentioned, other doctors, other research organizations. We're doing a significant research project with the UBC Okanagan. There are partners on that, along with some of the health authorities and providers, clinics. It's a wonderful sort of community approach.
It's going to go on essentially until at least the enrollment is completed once you've hit the target numbers for the groups, I believe. And then is this also sort of like a bridge? Like, would patients ideally stay on the platform and continue benefiting from it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it is a 12-week program. We started in January, but it will keep rolling. And there's, yeah, certainly lots of additional value for people to be involved after that, and then to bring the next cohort into those programs as well.
This gets me thinking also about the kind of the longer term dynamic here, how this would play out, and also where curatio kind of fits within the patient journey as is the common sort of industry jargon term, but essentially, typically, if a patient is gets sick, pre-COVID times, they would just like walk into the office, or book an appointment, walk into the office. It would be like a normal sort of process. Maybe you get a referral for a specialist, go to the hospital system, come out, and then there may or may not be some community-based services where you can go and seek out. So all of that could take anywhere from maybe a couple weeks to like years potentially if there's a lot of follow-up. And so I'm really curious, how can Curatio how does it fit into all of that? And then, is it an opportunity to offer services that are typically community-based services, but now they're kind of integrated into the platform? And at the same time, you're also working with, I guess, through CloudDX, uh, and you're kind of working your way into the hospital system, as I understand it. Is that accurate? So you're across the board, the entire patient journey.
Yeah, exactly. And we're designed as a social plugin to plug in wherever we're needed, on that journey. So yes, whether that's for providers and people staying safely at home, whether that's helping patients navigate what's in their community and how to access those resources, which is often a challenge. So we help in that way, helping them navigate. What they can tap into, and what's appropriate to them, along with the content and support and coaching that's in app.
One of the other follow-ups that typically happens once you leave the hospital system is, you get your specialist to give you prescription, and you might get refills in like a community-based pharmacy. The pharmacy component is something that has also gotten a lot of attention. There's a lot of new technologies, new platforms, new analytics, new relationships with different stakeholders that are enhancing the pharmacy experience, if you will. I wonder if Curatio has built out any relationships with pharmacists, and is there a way that that's sort of integrated into the platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're working with a number of specialty pharmacies already. So absolutely, providing you know a couple of things. So one is providing the patient support and the health literacy and the day-to-day support. Certainly helping with some of the workflow efficiencies and check-ins, but then also just helping. Whether it's a specialty pharmacy or PSP, helping them really understand their patient populations and that real time, real world evidence. So yes, we help them too.
Okay, perfect. That was also a nice little segue because I definitely wanted to ask you about the data that you're able to collect on the platform, and how that can be used to do anything from enhancing services, tracking, monitoring outcomes that are clinically relevant, and also relevant to the program development and that sort of thing. So, are there a couple of unique kind of case studies that come to mind, and how the data is being used, and how it'll continue to get built out?
For sure. On the data front, I think it's always important to mention that the user owns their data, and that's been core to our thesis from the beginning. We are the stewards, if you will, the safekeepers of the aggregate and de-identified, and so it's from the aggregate and de-identified that we get a contextual understanding of where those patients are, and by that I mean understand, what are they needing, what are some of the gaps. How can we best deliver, whether it's health information or content support, interventions that will help them on the get through to the next stage. So, we've coined this term real time, real world evidence because we're looking at where what are those micro moments in a patient's journey, and where do we not only lean in and intervene where they get stuck, but how do we start to predict on where they might get stuck, or where they may have a down day, or where they may slip off, and how can we bring in support to keep them as healthy as possible. So this notion of real time, real world evidence is really important to us, and very valuable to our partners because it lets them get a very real sense of what their patient populations are needing, and also the value that they're delivering, right? So whether that's improved health outcomes, increased efficacy, persistence, the impact of the outcome is what we take a look at.
The other piece I'm really curious about this too is, yeah, I've had a chance to speak with a number of other digital health companies. Um, there are platforms that essentially will let patients and healthcare providers, I guess, enter information manually. So this is like self-reported or patient-reported type of information. Does Curatio also sort of link up with other platforms? If you're partnering with healthcare providers in clinics, is there access, if you will, to medical records information with pharmacies, pharmacy records, that sort of thing, or is it all patient reported?
So we have an API and an SDK where we can do that type of integration. So we didn't want to be another walled garden, and wanted to be able to integrate with others. So we have that capability as well.
Always good to hear. I mean, it sounds like the platform and the data is going to be uh, really important, really useful to enhancing programs, and kind of catering and tailoring experiences to individual patients. And that's pretty much sort of the entire direction of the healthcare system. I guess it's all sort of moving towards very personalized and unique experiences that are tailored to individual people. So that seems fantastic. Awesome. Really good to hear about that as well. In terms of, if you were to look out the next couple of years, um, how do you see the company growing, and especially coming out of the COVID period? um, I should also ask, have you seen any changes in usership going through the COVID period, and can that is that sustainable? Is what a lot of companies are asking. Is that are things going to kind of bounce back, or are you able to retain all the growth if that's happened post COVID?
Yeah, there's certainly been a lot of growth, but I look at it this way. I mean, there was already momentum, not only for our company, but with healthcare transformation overall. So that that ball was already rolling. What COVID did was simply accelerate some of the momentum that was already underway. So I don't think that's going to change, and I think we've made there's been a really big tipping point in terms of um, the partnership now that we're creating between patients and different aspects of the health system. And there's also this, what we were talking about last year in terms of before COVID, the patient as consumer has been realized, and COVID certainly accelerated that. But a lot of this work, if you talk to any digital health company, these are these are companies that want to transform the world, right? These are companies that are out to make a difference, and it's a long, you have to be very patient, and it's a very, very long term engagement because change is hard, transformation is hard. So I fully expect this momentum to continue. It was already starting, before COVID, and I think it is the wheel is rolling along very well, very quickly.
Is there anything that is like a project or anything in the pipeline that's particularly interesting or exciting for you, either in the short run or if you're looking out a couple of years that you're looking to get into?
Oh, so many things. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
so many things.
Lots of interesting things happening.
Every day. I mean, that's one thing. Digital health is you're learning things every day, and it's every day is different. So, I'm excited about so many things. Certainly the personalization of what we offer and how to meet patients and families and caregivers where they are in their journey and be able to support them is it's very interesting to me. Um, and where on the data side, data both for the patients and for our partners, I think helps inform things like personalized medicine. And then when you start to think about that, where you've got data sets and, let's say, rare diseases that have never been there before, and how that is going to impact R&D, and inform inform whether it's clinical trials or cures, is hugely exciting. And I see patients participating in that and being a part of that dialogue, not separate from it. So I'm excited about the ways that we can help with that. um, Certainly, uh, some of the social support and mental health issues that I think we can tackle, and an unfortunate byproduct often of living with a health challenge is also mental health. And so I'm excited about what can be done in that area, as well as the integration of whether it's automated data or wearable data, and really giving users a nice little dashboard in the palm of their hands that helps them understand and get the support they need to have their best day and their best health outcomes. All of those things are really interesting to me.
And to me as well. It's interesting because this kind of goes back to a point that you mentioned earlier about family members can also come onto the platform. Super important point in my mind because there's a lot of talk and a lot of research around a caregiver burden, right? So it's not anytime a family member who's a patient gets sick, it's not just them dealing with it. It's an entire group of people, and often their family members are involved. So there's an opportunity to get them involved on a platform, building out a social environment. People can stay on track in a single place, in terms of how that person is doing, for family members that really want to be involved in their care. So that's a really interesting topic, and really something that I think needs to be built out a lot more.
Well, and there's a great company called Care Teams that does that as well. It looks at the coordination aspect between family and provider and patient, and does a great job of that. So there's we've got wonderful innovators in our mix.
Awesome. Okay, I know we're running out of time, although I'd love to continue this conversation. There was another really interesting piece as we were talking a bit about rare diseases, integrating with a lot of different data sources and how all this can kind of be used to innovate in medicines and other digital therapeutics and so on. But the clinical trial space in particular is something that has been it's primed for innovation because clinical trials are extremely expensive, and are necessary too. They're part of the regulatory process, and I wonder if that's part of Curatio's sort of ongoing projects, or maybe something for the future. Is involvement in clinical trials, streamlining the process, maybe in recruitment, retention through the clinical trial duration as well. Is that part of the vision?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, end to end, from helping to make patients aware of the research and opportunities, and helping to identify patients that are the appropriate, but all the way through to longitudinal tracking. So, again, back to what I'm excited about is, we can better understand the long term trajectory of some of these patient populations, and get them more involved, and more diversely involved. Right? I think it's well published now, the challenges with, whether it's the lack of women, or different cultures, ethnicities involved in clinical trials, and understanding that. So, I think we have a supportive role to play in everything from, helping people learn about trials, to identifying potential candidates, through to some of the longitudinal tracking. That's going to be very powerful for R&D.
Really, really interesting stuff. So I'm definitely interested and excited to hear a lot more about how the company grows and expands its services and its usership and partnerships over the next couple of years. So, Linda, it's been awesome having a chance to speak with you today. Really appreciate your time again. Again, really excited to learn a lot more, and I hope we can have you come back on as a guest in the near future.
It would be my pleasure. Yeah, thanks so much, and thanks for the great questions.
Thanks so much, Linda. Take care.
Take care.